at Murray State University, and I'm the chair of the ACRL Instruction Section's Management and Leadership Committee. I'd like to welcome you all to the first of the 2016 Discussion Forum series hosted by the Management and Leadership Committee. This is the second year for this series, and it is intended to help those who have leadership or management responsibilities for instruction in academic libraries to grow and connect with one another. Special thanks go out to the committee members who coordinated and planned this series over the past year. We'll be hearing from Malia Wiley today, but I also want to let you know that we have two additional discussion forums coming up. They are, the first is on May 10th. It is titled Strategic Design, Leveraging Instructional Design in Academic Libraries. That will be with Joelle Pitts and Nicole Pagowski. That'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then the third of the series for this year is titled Using the Framework to Foster Conversations About Information Literacy Instruction. That will be hosted by Sarah Miller and Amanda Nichols-Hess. That'll be May 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. This is Malia Wiley. She's focused much of her scholarship on library instructor development. She's a humanities librarian and liaison to history and philosophy and religion at James Madison University. She was formerly the instruction coordinator at Loyola University in New Orleans and co-founder of the NOLA Information Literacy Collective. She has a Master's of Arts in History from the University of Maine and an MLS from Indiana University. And just so you know, we reached out to Malia to speak on this topic because it was a frequent request from those who attended last year's sessions. I met Malia a few years ago at an ACRL immersion experience, and that was a theme that we talked about during that immersion, and I remember Malia being particularly knowledgeable about it. So this just goes to show you that when you take advantage of professional development opportunities and you say, you know what, I have an issue that isn't necessarily working out really well, and start talking to people about it, that those conversations can go a long way. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Malia. All right, Malia, you have the ball.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you to the ACRL Instruction Section Management and Leadership Committee for hosting this event. Welcome to this webinar on cultivating consistency in an instruction program without much authority. Let's start with an overview of the presentation. Library instruction programs enhance learning at their academic institutions. As managers of library instruction programs, instruction coordinators are responsible for overseeing these programs. Library instruction programs are diverse. They often feature a varied cast of characters with multiple modes of interactions. Today we will consider challenges faced by library instructors and instruction coordinators and opportunities for addressing those challenges. How can we, as information literacy leaders, foster the teaching role of library instructors? Instruction coordinators can cultivate a sustained learning culture with more programmatic consistency through shared instructional development. A community of practice is a model of shared development that involves members learning together. We will also explore examples of shared learning that allow library instructors and coordinators to grow together as teachers and learners. Okay, to start out, for curiosity's sake, let's take a moment in the chat box to see who in attendance has instruction coordination responsibilities. And if you're not an instruction coordinator, you can maybe indicate what type of position that you hold. So far, it's looking like most people are, or they might be in an administrative role or perform instruction. Liaison librarian, directors. Scheduling instruction. Oh, an archivist. Okay, so it looks like everyone is involved in instruction. Obviously, you're interested in this presentation. would indicate so. I specifically prepared this presentation with instruction coordinators in mind as the primary audience, but the content should really be applicable to anyone who considers themselves an information literacy leader. Challenges for library instructors. There has been a steady shift towards re-envisioning academic librarians as educators rather than service providers. Yet librarians may be underprepared or perhaps apprehensive to be teacher librarians. A 2008 study by Claudine Sproles, Anne-Marie Johnson, and Leslie Farrison found that the coursework of library and information science programs did not adequately prepare librarians to effectively teach, despite the growing prevalence of instruction in job ad descriptions. Librarians often have to learn on the job. In a 2015 investigation of how academic librarians in the UK perceive their teaching roles, Emily Wheeler and Pamela McKinney found that some librarians felt less confident and less willing to acknowledge their role as teachers, but that participation in teacher training would make the librarians feel more informed and more confident. More broadly, librarians have many areas of development to address aside from instruction. In addition to this pedagogical knowledge, librarians who work as departmental liaisons may also need to have subject-specific knowledge, and many librarians are additionally responsible for work in other areas of the library. There are also challenges for instruction coordinators. Coordinating in a library instruction program is no small feat. Coordinators may have no managerial power or limited managerial power, and they also may lack tasking authority. Library instructors often work across multiple departments and may not report to an instruction coordinator in any formal way. Typically, instruction coordinators are more likely to influence their ability to persuade than they are through a position of power. In their chapter, Surveying Terrain, Clearing Pathways, from their 2012 edited volume, Transforming Information Literacy Programs, Intersecting Frontiers of Self, Library Culture, and Campus Community, Courtney Bruch and Carol Wetzel-Wilkinson identify national, institutional, and professional challenges associated with the creation of an academic information literacy culture. This places the instruction coordinator in a challenging position. Bruch and Wilkinson write, when only one librarian in an institution is charged with or expected to implement an information literacy program, and/or so many challenges and underlying issues exist within the profession, burnout can threaten to undermine positive advancement. So, with all of these challenges, how can instruction coordinators approach them and begin a process of change? I suggest that rather than carry the weight of an instruction program alone, instruction coordinators should engage their colleagues as partners. So next, let's think about how shared development in a community of practice model can create positive change. Viewing a library instruction program through a sociocultural or a constructivist lens can be illuminating. Learning occurs in an individual and a social context. Every person learns from other people. What I find helpful as an instruction coordinator was to view my role more as an opportunity to teach and to learn, and really moreover to learn rather than to manage. In the classroom, librarians are often limited to 50 minutes. If you think of your library instruction program as a learning space, that environment becomes a boundless opportunity to learn. To me, it is really freeing to realize that I don't expect my students to approach learning all in the same manner. So I shouldn't be surprised that teaching takes a variety of approaches across an instruction program. Many librarians strive to be a guide on the side in the classroom rather than a sage on the stage. Can instruction coordinators take that guide on the side model into their instruction program as well? I think so. I think our pedagogical growth can be a mutual endeavor. Instruction programs have the opportunity to be a space where we can continuously learn, share, and reflect together. A community of practice is a model for shared learning. Communities of practice were originally defined by anthropologists in the 1990s. The concept has since changed over time and has been applied to many contexts, so it can be somewhat nebulous to define. This ubiquitous term is often abbreviated as a COP. Essentially, members of a COP learn together as they share in a common interest. Kristen J. Henrik and Ramarise Atterbury provide a further definition through a set of concepts. They write, the key characteristics of community of practice include a group a common goal or interest, and willingness to share and/or create knowledge in a safe environment. There's further discussion throughout the literature over if the nature of the COP can be informal or formal, or if membership can be voluntary or involuntary. Although COPs are somewhat difficult to define, there are many benefits associated with this model. According to the authors of Cultivating Communities of Practice, A Guide to Managing Knowledge, positive outcomes of the COP model include better strategy across an organization and an increased sense of belonging and improved confidence of members to do their work. During my time at Loyola, I led the library's Teaching and Learning Team, or TLT for short, as we called ourselves, although there were some members who did prefer to pronounce it as TILT. Our group was responsible for the library instruction program and the departmental liaison program. Team members came from across the library's organization. We typically had 10 or so members at a time, and I might have supervised over time maybe 1 or 2 people, but for the most part I didn't have any sort of supervisory or managerial role. After I participated in the program track of ACRL's Information Literacy Immersion Program in 2010, with Ashley, as she mentioned, I worked with TLT to create an information literacy plan. Part of that plan included instructor development, which led us to more intentionally plan and reflect on our roles as teachers. Specifically, I modeled our development after a COP model. Elsewhere, if you want to read more about it, I've detailed that experience in a book chapter called Library Instructor Development and Cultivating a Community of Practice. And I'll have work cited at the end of the slides. But next, let's turn our attention to examples of how instruction coordinators might incorporate opportunities for shared learning into their programs. Instruction coordinators can identify areas of development based on feedback from their colleagues. The ACRL Standards for Proficiencies for Instruction Librarians and Coordinators have been a useful tool for selecting those areas. These standards are, of course, currently being revised, so I've listed an outline of each. As of a draft from this fall, we can now anticipate that there will now be 7 new roles for instruction librarians to consider. In addition to the areas originally identified by the ACRL, I like to pose 2 additional questions. First, how have you grown as an instructor this past year? This allows instructors the chance to reflect on their experience. And secondly, I like to ask, what instruction topics would you like to learn more about? This allows instructors to identify other areas of interest or need beyond what the ACRL has identified. I found it helpful to go through this process on an annual basis. I kept individuals' responses confidential so that my colleagues would feel more comfortable identifying their needs. I would then target individual and group development needs accordingly. So then I would work with someone individually if they had a unique concern, and then if needed, I could convene a special interest group such as pedagogy related to a specific subject area like online learning. And then I would use the most prevalent responses to identify development that could be addressed by the entire group. And to a certain extent, tracking these responses has allowed me to monitor that progress. Engaging in strategic planning can further steer development needs. This type of planning is best done in collaboration with, or at the very least with the permission of members of the library's administration. Coordinators can work with library instructors to develop a mission or vision statement for their program. This collective process helps create a shared vision. And aligning that vision with the broader mission or vision statements from the library and institution can further bring cohesion. Instruction coordinators can also examine library and university strategic initiatives. These goals can be adapted into relevant goals for the instruction program. This can be particularly helpful for prioritizing areas of development. You might think of these goals as the learning outcomes of your instruction program. I found it useful to develop annual goals with my team. This creates a point where library instructors can report back on their contribution towards those initiatives. It also helps us connect our educational role with the bigger picture. Another level of consistency can be achieved by identifying, as a group, best practices for library instructors. TLT went through this activity. We investigated, we brainstormed, we debated, and ultimately had a list of ideas for liaison activities. This was really helpful for establishing what we could all experiment with and strive for. And depending on the nature of your institution, you could consider establishing more formal guidelines that also might be used for evaluative purposes. Engagement with the information literacy and educational world also provides further food for thought. There are tons of professional organizations, conferences, webinars like this one, listservs, blogs, social media, etc., that can keep us up to date with trends in information literacy and higher education. Instruction coordinators can selectively share these experiences with their colleagues. This can be as simple as forwarding an email or watching a webinar together and allowing for discussion afterwards, or even setting aside time specifically for librarians to periodically bring back their professional development experiences to the group and talk about it. One of my favorite sources of inspiration right now is Maria Accardi's very excellent librarian burnout blog. I also, outside of the library blogosphere, really like faculty focus emails. They're from Magna Publications, and they explore different strategies in higher education. So sometimes I think it's nice to get kind of an outside of a librarian's perspective. Also, I think I want to take a moment for you to share your favorite instructor-related resources in the chat box. Oh, cool. Someone else likes faculty focus. What resources keep you knowledgeable, entertained, or perhaps energized about teaching? Oh, someone else loves the burnout blog. EduCause. It's good. Yes, how adult learners learn. Very good point. Lots of listservs. I think some links to how adult learners learn. Oh, we should check out Monique's Twitter feed. Threshold concepts. Inside higher ed. Yeah, there are a lot of nice ACRL books. Yes, looking outside to other instructional design opportunities. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. I hope everyone found something new. Ultimately, sharing these types of resources with your colleagues helps keep your colleagues informed and can open up new dialogues. Altogether, these ongoing conversations help build our collective knowledge. Ooh, and there's also a suggestion here for writing a teaching philosophy. That's a really good idea as well, if you could do that individually, and you could also maybe try and come up with a group philosophy as well. All right, so next I'm going to talk about shared learning. Once you've kind of identified these development opportunities and explore them, here are a few examples of how you might teach one another. A shared reading and discussion of an article is fairly easy to arrange. Shared readings can be more or less formal depending on the topic. I always try to err on the side of being inclusive. Informal brown bags are nice for special interests. Ideally, if you're doing a shared reading in an area of development that's really important, it would be nice to incorporate that into a meeting that everyone can attend. It can also be really helpful to enlist others to facilitate the conversation. This highlights the expertise of others and reinforces the idea that the instruction coordinator is not solely responsible for pedagogy. Subject expertise 101 sessions were really popular in TLT. Other liaisons led sessions on topics like music, science, government information, and other specialized content. We also had sessions led by other people on things like blogs. So look outside. Consider ways that you can expand leadership to other members of your team. They're experts too. And you also might consider involving those with expertise from other areas of the library or even outside of the library. We had an ongoing tradition of coordinating a shared reading of the Horizon Report and later the library edition of the Horizon Report with our media services team. This interdepartmental collaboration, especially with information professionals who were not librarians, added a different angle to the discussion. One shared reading I really enjoyed involved talking about learning styles. Learning styles are listed in the ACRL proficiency, so this topic would come up from time to time. At one point, one of my fellow librarians had brought up in passing he thought the idea of learning styles had already been debunked. So another librarian found an article on the myth of learning styles, and we all read it together. This led to a really nice conversation about learning preferences versus legal accommodations, and also led to an interest in our group in universal design. So one passing comment really turned out to be fruitful and inspire reading, conversation, and further application. Switching gears, workshops are a perfect way for addressing larger developmental needs. I created a workshop for TLT on lesson planning in collaboration with another librarian. We gave small groups an examples of actual instruction requests, and then they worked through the process of using a lesson plan template, writing learning outcomes with Bloom verbs, designing activities accordingly, and then incorporating assessment techniques and reflection into the lesson. Several librarians continued using that template after our workshop. As our program grew, we later held a workshop on curriculum mapping. Liaisons brought the list of courses required for their programs, and we worked through where we might scaffold learning outcomes. This led to a greater knowledge of the curriculum and allowed liaisons to identify more strategic opportunities for instruction. It also gave us a better understanding of how the curricular structure of a program can really influence the type of engagement by a liaison. It became clear that it can be much more challenging to scaffold learning outcomes in areas like the humanities in comparison to the heavily sequenced majors, especially in professional programs. We then discussed additional strategies for meeting the needs of departments beyond instruction sessions, such as promoting individual consultations or online materials. Okay, we have a question from Shauna. How many instructors were in TLT when you did this work? Typically, there are about 10 members of TLT, give or take the year. So yeah, around 10 people. Thanks for the question. Another kind of signature activity of TLT were teaching challenges. Each semester, we issued a challenge for all team members. Some of the topics were trying a new instruction technique, or co-teaching a class, or incorporating an active learning technique, or mentoring a new librarian on instruction, or trying web conferencing, and the list goes on. This provided motivation for liaisons to try something different each semester. We would then report back on our experience at the end of the semester. We also provided the venue for librarians to openly express frustrations that they might have encountered and to allow for genuine conversation about instruction. This activity was so successful that we started out with library instruction challenges, but later added in a second challenge related to liaison work. Liaison instruction challenges included topics like attending a departmental event. All right, and before we go to the next slide, it looks like we have a few questions. Was TLT a voluntary COP? So it's a team within a team-based organization at Loyola, so there are various teams, but a lot of the activities were voluntary, if that makes sense. So we would meet as a team, but we would also do development outside. So sometimes there were times where people could select to participate, and other times when they had to attend a meeting. But I mean, it was really up to the instructor, the member of TLT, how much they wanted to participate, even if they were sitting in the room. Okay, and then let's see, mentor and modeling. Mentoring is another opportunity for instructors to grow. Earlier I mentioned a quote by Henrik and Atterbury about communities of practice. They also described their experience employing a COP model for mentoring new faculty at the University of Idaho Library. Mentoring was also part of my role as instruction coordinator. I would meet with every new member of TLT to introduce them to team and lesson planning. We also typically had teaching challenges involving mentoring each new group member. So in that way, new librarians learn different teaching perspectives from each librarian. I also think it's helpful for instruction coordinators to have their own mentors. It can be really beneficial to work with a compatible department head or an instruction coordinator at another institution to gain new perspectives or at least a sympathetic ear. And of course, if you attend something like immersion, you can find even more allies there. Instruction coordinators can further model effective instruction practices by sharing their experiences with colleagues. They can offer to co-teach instruction sessions that are of mutual interest or involve overlapping subject knowledge. It can be particularly helpful to co-teach with an instructor who is feeling anxious about a session. I always enjoy that every time that I co-teach, I learn a new phrase or a technique to add to my own teaching repertoire. I also like to share lesson plans that others can then adapt, especially if there is a course that is repeatedly taught. So TLT worked a lot with several classes from local high schools in the New Orleans area to introduce their students to academic librarian. Sometimes there would be a lot of sections. So at one point, one of my colleagues thanked me for sharing my lesson plan for those sessions because he had never shared instruction materials before. And so over time, other members of TLT volunteered their teaching materials to the group and even started sometimes posting them to Blackboard. So just moreover, these sharing instruction materials really help us expose each other to other teaching activities and approaches. Another tool that you might consider is peer observation. I think this is a particular instance where not being an authority figure can actually help. Instructors may feel more comfortable participating in this type of activity if the goal is to improve instruction rather than to officially evaluate them. If you do have evaluative power, you may consider enlisting your fellow librarians to peer observe one another so that they get this experience without being intimidated and focusing more on getting constructive feedback to improve teaching. Overall, these types of activities foster an open and creative atmosphere where people talk about instruction and try new things, and where trying new things to improve your instruction is simply just a part of being a library instructor. As your community of practice grows, you may consider branching out to those beyond your instruction program. Centers related to teaching on campus are a good place to start. As we engaged in our development in TLT, we got excited about it and wanted to share what we learned with our colleagues outside of the library. We partnered with the Center for Faculty Innovation to host workshops on preventing plagiarism and on creating effective and engaging research assignments. These events were well attended by faculty. Earlier, I mentioned that a lot of librarians feel anxious about their identity as educators. These interactions with faculty where librarians are pedagogical experts are particularly empowering. We also wanted to grow our COP to include other nearby librarians. I co-founded the NOLA Information Literacy Collective with the goal of fostering the development of academic information literacy instructors in the greater New Orleans area. We hosted our first forum in 2012 and have since established an executive board with members from across the city. It has been an excellent opportunity for instruction coordinators and instruction librarians in the local area to pool our talents. We have taken turns hosting the forum at different institutions, and we typically have around 40 attendees each year. The forum involves presentations and roundtables related to information literacy topics. It is also a venue for local librarians with subject expertise or other specialized interests to convene. Last year, of course, we focused on the new information literacy framework, and this year will be the 5th forum that is held. As the librarians, oh, you have a question?
There's a couple questions in the chat box.
Sure. Thank you. So, smaller staff librarians, we have 6 librarians and 12,000 students. Yeah, so it would be really helpful to engage together. Do you have a common set of outcomes that instruction librarians should follow for courses like college writing? Not particularly college writing. We worked on writing learning outcomes as part of strategic planning related to things like student retention, but not as specific as college writing. And then, do you find these types of programs work better in undergraduate libraries? So far, my experience with that type of program has been in undergraduate, primarily undergraduate library, although we did have graduate programs, I think they could work in either type of institution, really. When we did that curriculum mapping, one of the things we noticed is a lot of the graduate courses like nursing and criminal justice were extremely segmented, and that actually dovetailed with work people were doing at the undergraduate level in business. So those folks had a lot in common. And so they actually, even though they did graduate programs and undergraduate programs, were able to participate in COP, kind of more related to their area. And so another question, did TLT use/create a teaching template to ensure consistency in providing instruction across the board? The template was optional, so I'm not much of an authoritarian, so I wouldn't tell people to use teaching templates. I think there's many manners you can go about teaching something and still be effective as long as you reach your learning outcomes. So really the template was just something that was a learning tool, but a lot of people did use it in their planning. So someone else, how do you assess your ILL program? So there are kind of multiple ways to assess it. Earlier I mentioned you can use the proficiencies to kind of track how your group is learning, or at least how they view themselves learning. Another thing you can do is as you write those information literacy learning outcomes for your program, and those are established, you can then use those learning outcomes to collect information about how different instructors achieved those outcomes. And so that becomes a way of assessing your program. If you email me, I can send you the teaching template. It's actually something modified. Next door was Tulane University to Loyola, and they had the great opportunity to have Megan Oakleaf come and teach them how to make lesson plan templates. So we used the Tulane's template, Tulane's Megan Oakleaf informed template to modify our own. Okay, so another question here. Small instruction team here. Burnout is an issue. Feeling overwhelmed or burnout. Difficult to envision instructional service growth as you grapple with how staff is overextended. Yeah, I think we can be support mechanisms for each other, and also in some ways by not being highly regimented and highly managed, you can actually have more flexibility and kind of learning together. Are your librarians accepting of the term information literacy? Have you come up with alternatives? We all used information literacy. I know other people use things like information fluency, etc. Okay, I think I'm going to get back to my final slide now, but there'll be more time for questions. All right, continued growth. As librarians in TLT engaged in instructor development, our program began to expand. We had a steady increase in the number and different types of instruction sessions that we taught. We began to engage in more embedded librarian experiences, sometimes co-teaching with departmental faculty. The process of intentionally sharing our development and participating in our community of practice helped us to conceptualize our role as educators. In wrapping up, I'd like to revisit the idea of the library instruction program as an opportunity for perpetual learning. While instruction coordinators might not typically have managerial authority, they do have content authority. Instruction coordinators are particularly well suited to cultivate communities of practice because we know about pedagogy. I hope this presentation has inspired you to think about ways in which information literacies can use their own knowledge of teaching and learning to foster instructor and programmatic development. Instruction coordinators and their instruction librarians can mutually grow together as teachers and learners. Okay, looks like there's a lot of conversation occurring in the chat box. So some people are dealing with frozen positions. Someone asking for advice on online instruction. There's actually a whole, within our teaching and learning team, there were people that specifically focused on online instruction. So there were programs like criminal justice and nursing and a ministry program that were all online. So they would coalesce and talk about specific online instruction issues. People can feel free to chime in their favorite resources for online learning in the chat box if you want. Are there other questions or discussion topics? Looks like you typed the bibliography slide just as I posted it. TLT met sometimes every other, typically every other week. And someone else asked, have you embedded information literacy into the campus LMS? We did have a, I mean, I guess it depends what you mean by that. What we did do was we did have a library resources tab within our campus LMS. We used Blackboard. Blackboard was administrated by the library, so it was really easy for librarians to add things to Blackboard because they had administrative powers to post things in there. So people did things like, and I've done this too, we did things like create online tutorials and then post them in Blackboard. So there's another strategy for online learning. You can create things like LibGuides and then post them into the content management system so students could see them within their content management system if they don't see them on the library homepage. So we did all sorts of things like that, creating specific LibGuides, tutorials, and we did this for classes that weren't only online, but just in general, just because it's a helpful practice for all sorts of courses. Someone else, tips for getting librarians who have trouble seeing themselves as instructors to see themselves more that way. Thinking about the folks who have a collection-focused background, but also have instruction responsibilities. All right, so I don't think we're going to probably get all the answers we want today, but one of the things that I would say is kind of having these conversations in which you engage in educational topics. I think as you do those things and as you engage with more people, people begin to see themselves as educators. So I think simply talking about it helps. And I know from my experience in working as an instruction coordinator, you start off small, it seems. I think really sharing and opening up that dialogue, and then as people become more comfortable, that's how you start to kind of pick bigger goals and try activities, and people get more comfortable. Someone writes, as a distance educator, it is great to see that people are understanding the difference between online and face-to-face. Oh, this is my last slide, but if you Google me, you can find my email address because I haven't included it on the slide. Someone mentions taking advantage of resources at your institution. The Office of Faculty Development. I mentioned we worked with CFI, which was the Center of Faculty Innovation, which is kind of a similar group. Have I ever had at the institutions where I work developed buy-in from participants in the development that you put together? I guess I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that question because I think you have to always develop buy-in. I guess even though all of the librarians eventually at Loyal, it didn't start out this way, but all librarians eventually had instruction duties. So I think maybe that's some sort of motivation, is if you have instruction duties, you want to do a good job. And so I think developing buy-in is kind of exposing people to things, and then also as they see other people's successes. I would get instruction requests that would say, oh, I want this session to be taught like such and such taught it. So people would see other people having successes, and I think as that happened, other people wanted to try things. And I think in all that sharing and seeing other people's successes, people got excited, and then that's where the buy-in came in. And so someone asked, have you ever met resistance? When I very first started leading TLT, which I did really early on in my career, as soon as I started, I took instruction coordinator as like an interim role. And then 6 months later or so, I was in it permanently. And so my technique was a little different from previous techniques. So a few librarians said when we started doing these opportunities to learn and share together, like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this show and tell. And after a while, they all participated and actually ended up being really what they enjoyed. So I think there was initial resistance, but I think as time went on, everyone kind of bought into it, if that makes sense. And by buy into it, I really just mean everyone started realizing how important instruction could be and how it could be more fun, really, I think. So I think as a group, we kind of supported each other. Any other questions? Yeah, I definitely would agree that a group that works together should pick goals. So I mentioned that TLT as a team had yearly goals, and it's great to do that. And especially, thanks for putting my email up. Well, that's my old email because I'm at JMU now. I'll type my email into the chat box. I'm getting hold that thought. So the goals that we would pick out each year typically would, as I mentioned earlier, tie into kind of strategic initiatives that were going on over campus and throughout the library. So if your small group picks some goals, you can tie them into those kind of initiatives, but you can also just pick out whatever interests you. Like if you have an interest in universal design, pick that goal and see what you do with it and pick activities to follow up on it. It's definitely a great idea to pick goals because it kind of holds you accountable. Someone asked, how did I develop my own pedagogical knowledge? Let's see. Well, after I graduated from college, I taught English in Korea for a year through the Fulbright ETA program. And so that was kind of my first exposure to teaching. I also was a teaching assistant as an MA student in history, so I taught in the classroom that way. And then since then, reading, I've attended 2 immersion programs. I've attended the program track, the assessment track, looking at all the different kind of things we talked about earlier, blogs, listservs. and also working with other instructors, talking about what they like to do. My colleagues always inspire me. So someone asked, what were the goals specifically? Well, it depends on the, thanks Megan, it depends on the year. So sometimes we would tie into things like student success and retention was a big issue, so we would look at trends related to that. We would also, I guess, what were the goals specifically? Kind of drawing a blank. Whatever really was related to whatever was going on the campus. Any other questions? Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so maybe Rachel's doing a better job articulating what I was trying to say. So our yearly goals are tied into the library's strategic plans for that year, and I was also kind of saying you could also tie them into the institutional goals. Yeah, and it's definitely easier to start at the library level. And I would even say if you're like starting out writing goals, you might even just want to see what everyone's interested in. It might be a matter of saying, hey, we want to learn about learning preferences or learning styles or universal design, and then picking a few activities in which you incorporate that into your instruction plan, and then reporting back on how you did that. So I mean, as you kind of grow with your instructors, I think what you'll find is that you will become more formalized. But I also think like we should have fun too, right? Like a lot of us talked about burnout and stress. Like keep instruction fun. So while it's important to, of course, be accountable to your institutions, also leave room for creativity and innovation. Yeah, fun and a sense of humor. Any other questions? Looks like we're wrapping up. Ashley?
Yeah, I think so. I want to thank you, Malia, for a fantastic discussion. This has been really helpful. And thanks to all of you who have attended today. There will be a link to the recorded session that will go out soon. And I hope that you all will look at the other sessions we have scheduled over May from the Management and Leadership Committee. So thanks to all of you. Thank you, Christina, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks.